You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim Coppinger, and with me, as always, is my cheerful and effervescent co-host and partner,
Mr. Rocco Parisi. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias. Look at you, talking like different languages and stuff. You're Italian. Why didn't you say good morning in Italian?
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno, prepe amigo. That's about it as far as I can go in Italian. If I go beyond that, I know a lot of Italian words, but they're not the kind that you can say in polite society. And my family, I come from Jersey City. I learned from all of the, lived in Little Italy in Jersey City. There's no nice words you hear being yelled at the windows at 2 o'clock in the morning. It just doesn't happen, So one of these days, you and I have a fun conversation in Italian. So... All right, so let's see. What are we talking about today, Rocco? Oh, we're talking about collaboration for construction, working from home, office, and field. That's a long title. Who wrote that?
That would be you.
Man, I am long-winded. You have to stop me sometimes. I count on you to check me for these things. All right, so today we're talking about, obviously, working remotely in the construction industry. Now right at this moment in history, that's a huge issue for everybody. But the reality is that remote work is a really big concern for construction firms, even in normal times or the best of times, right? The truth is construction projects happen all over the place, right? And, owners and project managers and other management type folks, right? They're constantly traveling from job to job all over the world. You think about it, right? Even if you're dealing with, a project supervisor who is going to be on one site for the next 18 months, you still have to remember they're still on site, right? They're not in the office. You still have to be able to, work with those people on the same files. You have to communicate with them about different issues and problems, right? They have to, review, they have to comment, they have to mark up, they have to submit and answer RFIs and RFQs and RFPs and RF everythings, right? And, they have to deal with a million different, files and communication and problems on a daily basis. And you need to do that whether you're working in the trailer, out on the site, or in the office, right? Construction people are always looking for a better, faster, simpler way to control all those documents while still, making it readily available to their staff, and whether that staff is in the field or whether that staff is in the office. So let's start with you then here, Rocco. That kind of sums up what we're talking about today. So what kind of conversations have you been having, or do you have regularly around remote work with our construction clients? I mean, is this, the big concern, is the big thing that I think it is?
Yeah, it's a pretty big topic. I mean, we do a tremendous amount of work around Bluebeam, so a lot of the questions that I get are focused around how do we effectively use Bluebeam, both from a remote collaboration standpoint in the field and at home. And from the field standpoint, a lot of people ask, well, do we use iPads? Do we use Surface tablets? What do you recommend? And because again, most of what we talk about is Bluebeam, I see a lot of people using the iPads, and we often tell people the iPads are okay, but the Surface Pro tablets, although they're a little bit more expensive, they really have more power behind them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the difference between kind of an entertainment tablet and a carryable laptop, which is really what the Surface Pros are. And we don't sell these things. You know what I'm saying?
No.
We don't sell iPads and Surface Pros. I'm just saying, you can work with the iPads. And there are a number of different programs for this type of stuff that will work, and they've got apps that run on the iPad. And that's really the difference, I think, is that when you're dealing with the iPad, you're focused on apps, right? Small limited use applications that have limited memory, limited access, versus something like a Surface Pro or a 2-in-1 laptop. They're fully functional computers, right? Which means that you can install the fully developed, desktop version of the software and use all of those functions on those. And yeah, they are definitely more expensive, but there's distinct benefits to using those.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I mean, from my perspective, one of the big questions that I run across, whenever I'm talking with people on the topic of remote work in the construction world, they're always worried about access, right? What happens when I'm offline, right? What happens when I don't have internet connection, right? And so that really is one of the first things that you really should consider, right? When you're trying to formulate any kind of a remote work process for your company, right? You have to start with that question, how do we work if we lose internet? Let's face it, right? Out in the construction world, you're not always going to have a construction trailer with, Wi-Fi that everybody can get on. Sometimes you don't even have something like a simple mobile hotspot on your phone, right? Because you're working out in the backwoods 300 miles from the nearest cell tower. Construction, right? We do a lot of work in really remote locations. And you have to be certain that whatever system you've set up, that has to account for loss of connection. All right, so ideally you want something, right, that's going to let you keep working without interruption and handle the process of syncing files back to the central host, the central storage location automatically once you get connected again, right? So you want something that's kind of duplicate and do that back-end synchronization without you having to do anything. And usually that means working with some type of cloud hosting service, rather than trying to have your people work across, VPNs, virtual private networks, or virtual desktops that you are hosting on premises, right? I know that a lot of folks still look at that in terms of security. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. They want to try and host their own servers in-house because they're more secure, and put their one IT guy on it to make sure everybody can VPN in, and but that is not really conducive rather to what I'm talking about, right? When you lose connection, right, those VPNs and virtual connections, they're essentially dead, right? And your people cannot work until they're able to reconnect, right? And that's not helping them be productive when they're out of the office and out in the field, right? It's not what we're looking to do here, not what we're talking about today. So, Rocco, we work with a bunch of different cloud and collaboration tools, right? And the truth is, not all of them are really, suited for the construction world, right? Some of them are too complex. Some are just too memory or storage intensive for reliable field work, right? So not everything that we offer and work with is good for construction. But which systems do you see working best for our construction listeners here today?
Yeah, it's really both Bluebeam and Microsoft Teams. And it's kind of a coincidence, perhaps our marketing directs the conversations, to the folks that I talk to, but Teams is huge, and particularly now we're seeing more and more people adopting it and utilizing it pretty heavily. But I think from a collaboration standpoint, in terms of PDF sharing and markup, it's Bluebeam Studio,
right?
That's part of the Bluebeam product line.
Yeah, and then, like you said, I think you're right. Part of it is that we do focus our marketing on those things, so that's probably what's going to kick off those conversations. But when you get to things like Bluebeam, right? I think we talked about this in one of our previous podcasts, that I think it's like something like 60% of all construction companies use Bluebeam. So it's the big player, right? And that license structure to be able to host and collaborate and share things is part of your basic license. So, I guess it kind of makes sense that's where the big conversations kind of focus around. So, and I think another thing that ties into why both of those are popular, I think the key factor to consider when you're looking at any kind of a remote work system is really simplicity. Right? You want your users to have, centralized access to your files, your communications, company standards, company templates. and you need it whether they're actively connected via the internet or the cloud or not, right? So you need a process that's just going to be, point and click, right? You want something that doesn't need a whole lot of, multiple logins and manual file loads and manual processes, So, now the remote system can be done in one software package, right? And that's always my recommendation. Whatever it is you're looking to do to handle all the communication, collaboration, file sharing, you want one system, and I recommend that, whenever possible, right? But it can also be done, as a combination of a few processes. Some people use, Teams and Dropbox and SharePoint and, Studio and other systems, right? And you can kind of mix and match those. But, whichever way you go, whatever you decide on, I think you really need to have your focus on keeping it simple, right? And I think that, the more work that you can do in one file, not just one software package, but in one file, the better off you are going to be, right? In other words, if you can have people, mark up and review and approve and communicate and resolve issues in a single PDF file, right? Do all the work in one PDF file instead of via, 3 emails and 2 phone calls. Oh, and there's a Word document over here, and we're sending smoke signals from the top of the construction trailer. I think you're just much better off when you can kind of work in one file that everybody accesses. It becomes kind of like the central brain. Okay, so that's kind of the setup. So I think with that in mind, we're going to take a quick break here to hear from today's sponsor, and we'll come back and talk more about communication and file collaboration in remote environments. All right, so we'll be back in just a minute with the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us, 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from y'all. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco. All right, so today we're talking about remote workers in the construction industry and how best to set them up for success. All right, so as always, let's take a look at some of the maths on how important this topic really is. So based on info that I pulled from Harvard Business and Strategic Analytics site out there on the webs, all right, here's what we know about remote workers in the construction. Right, so construction workers spend 50% more time today in collaboration activities than just 2 years ago. So it's rapidly growing, right? And they expect that this number is going to increase by a minimum of 50% this year alone. And just to point out, that number was before all of the current crazy, right? It was going, I guarantee it's going to be dramatically higher than that. That's how fast this is growing. This is a big issue, So 42% of the construction workforce is regularly mobile in 2020. In other words, it's their primary work mode, right? Not just, they're working from home today because of issues. 42% of them normally work remotely. That's a huge chunk of the market, right? And the funny thing is, and here's the thing, right? And I love that the numbers match, right? So 42% of the workforce is regularly mobile, and it says 42% of construction people would swap a portion of their pay for the ability to telecommute and work remotely. I don't know if they're the same 42%, but it's the exact same number. That made me laugh. It's like once people get a taste of it, it's like, ooh, this is good. And the funny thing, right here, just from a monetary standpoint, on average, those people say they'd be willing to take a 6% pay cut just so that they could work remotely on a regular basis. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so construction industry owners report a 50% decrease in attrition among remote workers. It means they're half as likely to leave your company when they're working remote. Okay? All right, and remote workers can save $7,000 a year on average, personally, in their personal income, just in travel time, moving back and forth to the office, from the job site to the office, etc. That's big, right? And the key here is that actually, because of all those secondary costs and everything, employers save on average $10,000 per employee every year, because you don't have to maintain office space and heating and cooling and travel pay and all of the other things that go with making people come to the office at the end of the day or twice a week, when they're working from the field, right? So, looking at that, right, we see that, not only is remote work a necessity for the construction world, it's really a huge benefit to both the worker and the employer. Right? To me, this is a no-brainer to me, right? Everybody wins, right? So why aren't we looking to set this up whenever we possibly can? So that's kind of how I see it. Rocco, do you see people actively pushing for remote work and access for more employees, or are we still seeing a little bit of a resistance from the owner side? Do we still have people who are concerned about, worker productivity when they're not monitored, and the security of file access? Is that still a concern, or are people coming around to this idea of remote workers?
Yeah, I think it's something that's evolving. I think our particular health crisis now is helping those that were resistant to the idea see that, hey, this could really work. This is working. Not that it is working. So I think a little bit of the older generation is resistant to the idea. Well, I need to have people in the office. I need to see them. I need to be able to walk up to their desk, and they're really starting to see that, hey, I could still have just as much communication with these people if they're working from the job site or if they're working from home. As far as the security aspect, it honestly never comes up in my conversations from the sales standpoint. Hey, how secure is it? It doesn't come up anymore. I think people are starting to really see that it's working. Our data is not being stolen, and it's effective. So,
okay, that's a good thing. I like that. Okay, cool. So, I think one of the great wonders, right, of the modern construction world, right, is this advent of cloud-based hosting technologies, right? So, like I said, we talked about systems like Bluebeam Studio and Microsoft Teams. They're everywhere, and they're really affordable. All right, as a matter of fact, Studio, right? It's completely free, right? When you buy Bluebeam, it comes as part of your standard Bluebeam license purchase. So there's no, the whole hosting and collaboration tool. That's just part of the basic purchase of the software. So I think a huge benefit of these types of systems is that like I said, security concerns actually go down when you set up remote workers. Rather than going up as you might expect, right? So, I always try and explain to people when it does come up, and like I said, I guess maybe because I work more on the technology side with the IT guys, rather than the sales end. So I do actually have those conversations about security, I think more than you do. But the thing I always try to explain to people is that things like security patches and virus updates and backing up files, all of those things cease to be a concern when you're working with a company in terms of Microsoft or Bluebeam or whoever that have full-time staff dedicated to making sure that your data is always fully patched, fully up to date, fully secure, fully backed up, 24/7. They have full-time staff that do nothing but make sure your data is secure. And most small construction companies, right, even medium-sized construction, most of it, we just can't afford full-time, staffs of 10 people to do nothing but sit around and patch and secure our data, And I think one of the other aspects, I think, on the security side that I point out a lot is particularly with like the IT management guys. One of the real benefits of modern technology for your remote workers is that you can enable remote system wipes and automated data recoveries. So that means when your laptop or your tablet or your phone gets lost or stolen, or even if it just gets damaged and dropped and run over by a bulldozer on the work site, right? These remote cloud-based collaboration systems are designed to regularly synchronize your data back to the cloud. So if something goes wrong, you're not going to lose the information you spent weeks working on. You can just, it's in the cloud. You can just restore it. You get a new device and get back to work. You know, if people leave the company or something happens, they lose a thing, you can just, you know, reach out with the push of a button and wipe data, your, you know, proprietary company, you know, billing data or whatever else you have. You can wipe it from those systems instantly, which is really,
something
really nice.
you just said is very scary, Jim. Just a vision of my phone being crushed by a bulldozer.
And it could be worse. It could be your partner being crushed by. Wait, you might actually like that. That's a whole other.
Well, yeah. My phone is pretty important.
Listen, you've seen the size of me. That have to be a pretty big bulldozer to run me over anyway. So, yeah, none of us like losing our phones, man. That's always a scary thing. We depend on those, but it's the same thing, right? You know, most of us have our directories and phone directories and numbers and everything backed up to the cloud anyway. It's the same concept, right? We just do it with everything that's you know, company based information. Now it's a great setup. So, all right, so you know what, Rocky, you make fun of me, fine. So if I recall correctly. All right, when we first started Zentech, right, you'd never worked in a cloud-based environment before, and you know, you were a little bit paranoid about it and how safe it was going to be, how much of a pain it was going to be, right? You'd always kind of use, you know, in-house servers and so on. But we do all of our work remotely, right, using SharePoint and Teams. How has that transition been for you? I mean, what do you like and what do you hate about working, you know, through the cloud and with remote workers?
I can't really say that I hate any component of it. I mean, it's at first it was a little weird, you know, how's this work, but once you see it in action and happening, I mean, accessing files and saving files and not having to save everything to my local PC, and the ability to for anybody who's given the permission to be able to access what I create now, to literally being able to access it in a minute from now, or to be able to co-author documents. So that's huge. I mean, yeah. So I love it.
Good. That's a good thing, right? So it does work. And the other thing I would point out is, you know, all of our workers, right? We all of our workers are remote. Everybody works remotely, right? We got people working from home in small offices all over the place. And that was something you, right, being an old school guy yourself, when we first started off, you were nervous about not having that, you know, direct oversight of employees and what are they going to do and how do I know if they're working and how can I, you know, have you changed your mind on that? You feel more comfortable there?
I do. Yeah.
Well, that was a simple answer. I was really hoping for something a little bit more than that, but fine. Just leave me having to talk. Yeah.
No, look, if you want to, you could always monitor what your employees are doing. If you're talking from a management standpoint, you know whether your team is being productive or not. You know, at the end of the day, if they're not getting their work done, you can tell.
Right. And I think that's the key, right? I think there's a little bit of a leftover in the American psyche, and it's been here for, you know, the last 100 years, and it kind of comes from that, you know, hourly factory worker thing where you sat on the assembly line and someone watched to make sure you were constantly working, you know, because you were getting paid, you know, either by the piece or by the hour. You know, and that really doesn't apply, particularly the construction world. You know, people are going to get their work done or they're not going to get their work done. Does it matter if they are, you know, locked and sitting in their chair, you know, 8 hours a day? No, they're just, you know, you're worried about results, not, you know, oh, I'm paying you for this hour. You better be working every minute of that hour. Like I said, that's a manufacturing plant kind of structure, and I don't think that applies to the construction world. So, all right, so let's see. Oh, so like I was saying earlier, right? I think it's about keeping things simple, right? I think if you can build a single point of connection, right, where all the data that your people need is centrally stored and accessible from any system, anytime, anywhere, any place, then you're 80% of the way to remote work success. Okay? And I think the other 20% is about tying the communication and collaboration pieces together. You know, one of the things that's really become kind of an outdated idea is the concept of like using emails and attaching or even just referencing files. It doesn't work long term. There's just too much chance for miscommunication, things not being updated, people working on out-of-date information. You want to look at systems that let you have, you know, people do what Rocco was saying earlier, co-authoring. of files, right? And that means, they can work on the same file at the same time. You can have dozens of people marking up, leaving comments, working together in real time. Or they can go in at different times and leave comments for each other within the file. You can have real-time chats, discussions. You can share whiteboards for brainstorming, right? Share screens, whatever. I mean, there's a dozen different ways to do this, right? And like I said, when you get into tools like, Teams and Studio, right, they've taken some of those older cloud-based features, right? Like SharePoint and OneDrive and Dropbox, right? Which are just basic file hosts, right? That you drop the file out there and host it. And that's great insofar as it goes. But, the more modern technologies are integrating really powerful ways to incorporate, email and chat and audio and video and a dozen other tools that we all need so that you can actively simulate people working side by side while they're still in a remote environment. So there's essentially no difference, between me working in one office, you working in another office, or us literally working at the desks next to each other. Right? With technology, that separation goes away. Right? And I think that's the way that the modern construction world works. And it's not just because of current conditions, but that's the long-term development of this industry. Right? We've been moving in this direction for more than a decade. Right? And I think that any firm that isn't actively moving to set these types of systems in place are going to be in a lot of trouble. You are not going to maintain your workers. You're not going to be able to maintain, what's the word, competitivity? I don't even know if that's a word. You're not going to be able to compete with your counterparts if you're not actively making sure these systems are up and running and in place to keep your people enabled wherever they are. Whether it's from home, the site, the field, the airport, the hotel, or the local Starbucks, whatever it may be. So, anything you'd like to add to that, Rocco?
What's for lunch?
What's for lunch? Nothing. You don't get lunch. You gave me a 2-word answer before. You're not allowed to eat. Back to the salt mines. All right, brother. I think we can wrap it up.
It's an essential. It's an essential part of growth. I mean, again, put the current health crisis aside. Being able to easily collaborate from wherever you are today is critical. It's critical for business growth and business success, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. Like I said, it's kind of how we built our entire business, right? That's the only way we have ever worked. So I'm a fan of it. I think it works well, and I think it translates into the construction industry entirely with no problem whatsoever. All right, so I think we've kind of covered the bases here. I think we can leave it here for today. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we will catch you in the next episode of the Cattle Call Podcast.